We're just waiting for the Minnesota Broadband Task Force meeting to begin. They will be looking at the draft of the Broadband Task Force report. There are 3 subcommittees. The previous meeting, they looked at 2 of the subcommittee notes, and now they will be looking at the 3rd.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Teddy.
Okay. Hear me.
Hi, everyone.
Always the first challenge. Good afternoon, Yvonne. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Just finished a brisk walk with my husband.
How was it outside? Oh, that sounds cold.
It was. I have, well, there's no such thing as being cold. There's inappropriate clothing. I did not have the right clothing. I'll do better next time.
Hearing that. Okay, so it's 12:31. I still see some folks are dialing in. Diane, do we want to do a roll call and then we put up the agenda?
Yeah, I can do roll.
Okay, I'm going to have the agenda. I can share the agenda.
Okay. Teddy, you're here. Yvonne Carabo.
Here.
Okay. Nolan Calvin. Gail Cook. Steve Bensky. Steve Georgie.
I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you. Jason
Okay.
Hollanday.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Mark Johnson.
Yep, I'm here.
Thanks, Mark. Bernadine Jocelyn.
Morning, everybody. I'm here.
Okay, I saw you, I know. Brian Tranbier.
I'm here, Diane. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, I should say.
Teresa Sunday.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Jim Wycombe.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We can hear you. Paul Wirtz. I know I saw you.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Dave Wolf. Dave Wolf. Nolan Cowden. Dale Cook. Was that Dale? Steve Bensky. Dave Wolf. Okay, I'm getting a little feedback, so I don't know if someone is not muted that should be.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Diane. Well, welcome everyone. And number one thing, I want to thank you for making the time to be here today. I know we didn't finish all the things we wanted to cover at the last meeting, so we set up sort of the special meeting to be able to finish the last portion of the discussion from the last time we met. A couple other things. Obviously, we were supposed to have a meeting on Monday. But since this meeting couldn't get scheduled till today, we pushed the next meeting up to next Friday. And then on Monday, what we're going to have is the writers come through and work on bringing the document together. Good news is we already started consolidating some of the documents. Obviously, this piece on digital inclusion hasn't been included yet. But the goal is we'll have sort of one document, and just from an initial pass, we're moving some things that were overlapping together, and if there's sort of calling that out, and making sure that we'll have that discussion come Friday. But our goal really is to hopefully, by next Friday, we should have a good draft of a document we want to put together with some of the key points we want to be able to submit to the governor and the legislature. So again, I appreciate everybody's effort and everything else that you've done to get us to this point. The agenda for today is pretty straightforward. Obviously, this initial piece, but then kind of walking through the economic development and digital inclusion subgroup and the document they put together. So I will turn it over here to Bernadine here in a short moment. And then I don't know that will take us the entire time. Maybe some of the discussion might. If we end early, that's great. But if not, at about 5 minutes till the hour is up to that we're together, we'll kind of open up for any public comments, any other business, and the next steps we need to talk about. So that's the goal for today. Is there anything else before I kind of get into the next piece that we need to discuss, or any comments anybody has?
Teddy, this is Diane Wells. I forgot Micah Myers.
Oh, okay. And Mike, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Good afternoon.
I was going to say sorry for being late, but Nolan Cawthon's here too.
Oh, hi Nolan, how are you?
Doing all right. Just been busy with a ton of field work. We're still pretty much at the same summer type volume when we typically see a 30% drop off by this time of year, and we're still really busy.
Got it. Okay, any other comments, questions? So I've been told that a good rule of thumb is to wait 7 seconds after you ask a question. 7 seconds seems like an eternity when you do that. All right. So with that, Bernadine, maybe we'll turn it over to you, and we can talk about the economic development and digital inclusion subgroup work and some of the Word document that's been put together. Will that work?
Great. Thanks so much, Teddy. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Can you guys see that now? Teddy, yes? You're nodding yes?
Yep.
Super.
Yep.
Great. Well, it's my real privilege on behalf of our subcommittee to present our draft recommendations this morning. Thanks, everybody, for gathering again for this. Our committee members here, Dale, Jason, Micah, and Yvonne. So as we walk through this, you'll see we have 3 core recommendations. Then I want to talk at the end about the supplemental recommendations, that the way that we are proposing that the task force address some of the other efforts going on in the state that have in the past been addressed through our task force report. We have an idea about creating this kind of 2-tiered sets of recommendations. But to start out, the first recommendation is around continuing our state grant program and funding it from the base budget. And I recognize that that is a theme that has been really embraced across all of the subcommittee work. And so our text here, what we've offered, is an attempt to respond to the task force requests and I think aspirations to include stories and examples of the impact of broadband on community vitality and prosperity, both how the presence of broadband enables response, has enabled our counties and other local officials to respond to COVID, and how the absence of broadband has hindered it. So we're trying to show both sides of that spectrum, the impact of broadband as a engine for economic development, and how the absence of broadband access and adoption hinders that. And so our expectation is that that these examples in here could be, kind of deconstructed and dispersed through the final report to punctuate and illustrate the point we're making about why we need to continue this number one recommendation here to fund the grant program. And so what we've included here are the ratings by speed goals for the 120, the top and the bottom counties, where they're at in terms of the percentage of access available at those speeds. Wanted to give our legislator a picture of, at the county level, those that are at the top of the meeting those goals and those at the bottom. And then what follows here are examples from 8 of the counties that focus groups were conducted in, really in the grip of COVID this summer, and bringing forward examples from Swift, Rock, these different counties about the experience of those local communities that had good broadband and what that allowed them to do in terms of COVID response and those that lacked it. Here is a quote here from Kyle Oldry, the Rock County Administrator, that talks about how fiber to the home across the county really enabled them to respond effectively to the challenges of COVID. And there are some other testimonials in here too that, you know, we invite the authors to use as they construct the final report. So that really is in support of our first recommendation, and that we've all agreed to as a task force, really trying to get some granular stories and examples in front of people about what this means in terms of people's lives. So in some counties with adequate broadband are thriving, and those without are struggling. And we wanted to really make that come alive here in this first part. So we hope that'll be helpful to making the case about why we need the fund. Moving on to our second recommendation. So this is a unique recommendation.
Just a quick
and go ahead, Teddy.
Yeah, so obviously I thank you for that, and I got a chance to kind of read through this as well. So we will, as the writers come together, we will take this portion and combine it with the other recommendations, as you mentioned, where you said that we want the continue to fund this and be in the base budget, and we will include some of these these stories in there. So that'll be more work on next week, but just an idea. Teresa has a question or a comment.
Yes, hello everybody. I just wanted to comment on Swift County. We did reach out to the Appleton librarian. We were able to get into her house. A technical operations supervisor went in, and with another technician, there you are right there. And it's not a MediaCom issue. It was how they had their network set up inside their home. They swiped it out and rebalanced everything that they had going. The wiring was good. It wasn't, again, MediaCom. It was not a plant issue. So the city of Appleton is well served. So this is not a very good example. In fact, it's not a good example of them lacking service. We haven't heard back. The technician left his card and said, if you have issues, please let us know. It was, in fact, their internal networking and how they had it set up. So I would like to see this example taken out. The rest of them are pretty good, but this is absolutely not a good example of someone lacking sufficient broadband. I understand why you put it in there, but it shouldn't be in there. They're like, no, it's not true.
Perhaps we could replace it with one from Swift County that illustrates the benefit to a small business. That was one thing I noticed as I was reading through the stories is we have home, we have school, but maybe one that talks about how a small business benefited from the broadband would be a good one to put in there for Swift County if we can find one.
I think that's a very good idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Yvonne. Let's move on then to our second subcommittee recommendation, and this is a recommendation unique to our subcommittee. I know that elsewhere there's a recommendation about continuing to fund the Office of Broadband Development, and I think the opportunity here is to, with the task force approval, to consider incorporating this recommendation into the overall recommendation on continuing the Office of Broadband Development. What we are recommending here for the task force consideration is that we would recommend that the legislature create an Office of Broadband Operating Fund, and that the operating fund would be used to promote adoption and redress digital inequity. This is based on our research that and we try to document them here in the report in our draft about how public investments in adoption are critical alongside public investments in access. And so this request for $1.5 million of an operating budget was developed with input from the Office of Broadband Development. This was what they brought forward to our committee as an example of how a program budget might be used illustratively, and that number, just wanted to clarify, came from them. And the rest of the text in here talks about again, for the reviewers or for the authors to mine and use as they think it's helpful to support this recommendation for public investment in adoption through the Office of Broadband Development. Talk about the benefits to communities and to the economy from investments in adoption, and citing some studies here and about the referencing Minnesota's achievement gaps and how public investments in broadband adoption can help us to mitigate the education achievement gap. So I'll stop there. I don't know, Teddy, if you want to invite a conversation at this point, or if you want on this recommendation, or if you want us to proceed to the third. I'll bow to you for process.
No, so let's stop here for conversation. Just one clarification I have is, and I think I asked this question last time, because there was a recommendation, I think, from the Minnesota model to continue funding the Office of Broadband, and I think it was a $700,000 or something like that annually. I can't recall the exact number now, but the request here is to have an additional $1.5 million, right? To
Thanks
be able
for that opportunity to clarify. Yes, Teddy. The Office of Broadband Development has not been funded in the past to do adoption programming work, and as I understand that recommendation coming forward, that is for the mapping, the grant program, and the staff. So this is, yes, a new idea. It's a new proposal that we would include on top of the baseline funding for the office, a program budget, and that's the way this talks about it. Operating fund to promote adoption. So program money for the Office of Broadband Development to lead adoption efforts, and this 1.5 million here is illustrated. This is the Office of Broadband Development's suggestion for how those funding, how that money might be deployed to improve adoption across the state.
Great, thank you. Paul Wertz? Paul, you can go ahead and ask the question or make a comment.
Sorry about that. Forgot to unmute. I know, Bernadine, we've had similar discussions over the last several Broadband Task Force about adoption and literacy. This is not really a statement about the recommendations here. I think these are fine. I guess my question is, I'm asking you because Blendon is a major partner. I've not been given a satisfactory answer, not from anybody, but we have these recommendations, but what is this Connected Minnesota that's out there that has $2 million? That, as I read these recommendations, that is what that nonprofit is supposed to be doing. And it seems to me, wouldn't we, are we going to be going down a dual path where a foundation is doing something and the Office of Broadband? Are they commensurate? Are they conflicting? I don't know what it is, and I know Blandon's a partner, so maybe you can clarify that for me.
You bet. Thanks, Paul, for that opportunity. So what Paul's referring to is a new public-private partnership that was catalyzed by Governor Walz in the wake of the really in the height of the pandemic early on in March, when he was looking for ways to bring the private sector in as a partner in addressing the challenges of COVID. And so Best Buy and the Minnesota Business Partnership and St. Paul, Minnesota and Community Foundation and Blandon Foundation and Comcast as founding partners came together to create this partnership for Connected Ammon. And yes, between May and July, the partnership raised $2.1 million, which were then re-granted out in September in this space of devices, connectivity, and supporting services. And those funds were meant to really focused on the K through 12 in the educational setting to help ensure that all kids had, devices, connectivity, and the supporting services to use them. So that 2.1 million fund, Paul, was raised from, foundations, corporations, and private individuals, and has been already spent. The eligible grantees for that were not-for-profits that supported schools, the Minnesota Education Technology Network that provides kind of back-end support services for school districts. Then in the wake of the George Floyd murder, Twin Cities-based businesses kind of came together and asked themselves, what can we do to help redress the causes of the inequity that resulted in this civil violence? And they put together, so it's called the Twin Cities Business Equity Consortium, I believe. And they studied, so what could we do, where our investments needed to help mitigate this inequities that resulted in this violence. And it'll be gratifying, I think, for the members of this task force to hear that they saw digital equity as a very upstream place for investment. And so that Twin Cities Consortium has launched its own fundraising goals of $5 million and have completed a partnership agreement, an arrangement with this Partnership for Connected MN, that the Twin Cities businesses are going to give their $5 million, they've raised 2 of that 5, to the partnership to distribute in this same addressing the same space of devices, connectivity, and supporting services. An RFP to distribute those $2 million is going to go out on the street next week. Those funds will be distributed in early February. So it's not a foundation, it's really a unique partnership, Paul. It's a collaboration. And we are looking for other opportunities to redress this besides just making grants. I think so that's a very, I think, encouraging effort. It shows how Minnesotans can collaborate and align. But the point, I think, from our subcommittee's perspective is, whose work is this, right? Where should this reside? And what we're trying to bring forward here is this recognition that public investments are needed in adoption, not only in access. So the funding that has been raised and distributed from the partnership and the consortium is private money that's coming in and being applied to public purpose. What we're trying to promote here through this recommendation is, this recognition that we need public investment for adoption, and that is a proper role for public funds and taxpayer dollars. In addition to access, that we also need public investment in adoption. I hope that was helpful, Paul.
Yeah, that is my only other comment was, and I appreciate the overview because that really clarifies things. If we look at, I always tend to look at the Office of Broadband like a foundation. We've got a staff of roughly 2.5, 2.5, if you will. I would want to make sure that these recommendations, coupled with, I would hope, a large, broadband grant program, that we have the staffing. We could be taking this foundation, if you will, potentially up to, 25, 30, 40, $50 million over a biennium, maybe even more. That's going to be a lot of grants. Are we going to have the size and scale staffing wise to not only manage and get these grants out, but to also really have a robust, digital literacy adoption program as well? I want to make sure that that's part of the operation of it so we can achieve all of those.
That's a great point, and I appreciate that. Where I take comfort from is that this is a proposal from the Office of Broadband Development itself. And so I guess I'm relying on their good faith that they would not propose this if they felt it would not work for them and it would somehow take away from their focus on the grant program. But maybe, I don't know if it'd be appropriate to ask Diane or Angie if they wanted to comment.
Thank you, Bernadine. Angie here. No particular comment other than to note that this is digital equity issues we've been charged with in the office since it was created, and this would give us funding to do some of that work.
Mark Johnson has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Teddy, and thanks, Paul, for bringing up the staffing issue, because that was one of the things I was going to say is, are we making sure that we're not creating a staffing issue at the Office of Broadband? But that sounds like that's kind of been taken care of. The other thing I'll say is that I like this because it's a leadership piece. It kind of addresses that fractured leadership that we identified as a barrier, where there's so many different things going on, so many different places, and the fact that the Office of Broadband, in essence, has been charged with, being a leader in these areas. This gives them some ability to do that and to show some leadership there, where I think we haven't had that statewide as much as we should. So that's all I'll say.
Thanks, Mark. Teresa, I thought you saw your hand up and went down. Did you have another?
It is up. I just wanted to point out that Anna Boroff had questions in the meeting chat, and I don't know if Bernadine, if you saw those.
No, it's hard for me. I've got my screen up. I haven't seen the chat, so if someone can help me.
Yeah, I'll read it to you. It's impossible to look at comments or people when you have sharing a screen. If these grants go to providers, what would it look like for current providers who already have programs? Or are these funds more like grants for families to purchase access from providers who could develop a program or use an existing one?
So I guess my response to that would be that obviously these grant programs have not been designed, and we don't know, and I don't know how much thought the Office of Broadband Development has given to what this might actually look like. But there would be knowing, the process of developing a request for proposal or processes and procedures, criteria for standing up these programs would, I'm sure, benefit from a lot of stakeholder input and consultations, and that would be the job of the Office of Broadband Development to ensure that we were, doing good and not doing harm, and that it took into account the needs and capacities of our provider community as well. I think these are meant to be sort of illustrative examples, right? To give some flesh to the bone about what it might look like to put public investment into adoption programs. And I think that the main point here is that we focused on these three big buckets of literacy, broadband access, and small business digital fluency. Are there other questions, Teddy, in the
No, I don't see any other questions. Any other questions or comments from anyone else? Yvonne has a comment.
The way I'm reading, how we've written these, the second and third points specifically talk about providers, assisting providers with developing models, and the idea of partnership, and doing a matching with other organizations. Both of those seem to me to be open to the idea of developing these and modeling them in such a way that they could work together with people who are already doing things successfully, or who propose, new ideas and new innovative ways to do it. Oops.
Thanks for that, Yvonne, and I certainly invite other members of the subcommittee as we go through this to chime in. Thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate that. Teddy, shall we move on to the next recommendation then? If there's no further discussion on this.
Let's go ahead and do that.
All right. So our third recommendation addresses our speed goals, and our subcommittee spent considerable time on this, and we have come forward with a recommendation for the full task force consideration that the task force recommend that Minnesota update our broadband speed goals to 100 by 100 symmetrical service. And I know we've spent quite a bit of time at the last task force meeting talking about our speed goals, but I'll just take a minute to kind of run through our rationale here, and then we can talk about it again. So we are beginning with sort of a historical perspective to remind us all, including the legislature and the governor, that historically, we have revisited our goals periodically. And that the federal definition has changed as well. We've certainly seen, as a result of the pandemic response and the civil unrest, that this question of equity and demand is really revealed to all of us, not just those of us who care about broadband, how important broadband access and adoption is for participation. And wanted to then remind folks and in the report that in statute that we also besides establishing speed goals, we talk about the leadership position, and Mark referenced that earlier. So when we compare ourselves globally and other states and so forth, we see here where we are ranked and in terms of our goals, and wanted to keep people's eye on the context. You guys have heard me say before that my dad would always tell me, compared to what? And if we're talking about a leadership model and maintaining our leadership position, that we be aware in the state how other states, the levels of investment and the aspirational speed goals that they are adopting. And in addition, in the global context here, there's some context here about how we do globally as well. So we also build on the letter that we received from the task force. And I don't know if you guys, we didn't get a chance to talk about this at our last meeting, but after that initial letter was submitted to the task force and Mayor Larson from Duluth presented it to us, subsequently the Minnesota mayors together in the Regional Council of Mayors received additional signatures. So those additional signatures and mayor's endorsements have been loaded onto our shared site there. So because they addressed us and they came forward with this recommendation, we cite that here as well. We also cite the information presented to the task force from former FCC member Jonathan Chambers, and who talked about this importance of ensuring that public investments maximize public benefit. And because our current border-to-border grant program does require that awarded projects are scalable to 100 by 100, this is a standard that is already familiar to providers and is already informs the network design that they submit for consideration. And we know from our own focus groups, and those of you who have been following this closely, the COVID impacts, that a 20 megabit upload speed does not meet household needs in a COVID and post-COVID environment. And we know that providers are already capable of offering those high speeds. Oops, my computer says it's going down. Make sure I get everything plugged in here. I don't want to lose a connection. All right. And so we believe that the impact of this goal adjustment on the program itself would be minimal, because we already have that requirement of 100 by 100. And we think that claiming ambitious goals for this state helps us retain our leadership position and helps condition both our elected leaders and our residents of the state to understand that, as we talked about earlier, that we are never done, and that this is an ongoing investment that we need to make as a state to stay technologically literate, and as the need for speed grows, the need to close the gap grows more urgent, and then we in Minnesota are forward leaning. And so before we go on to the supporting recommendations, I'm going to pause there, Mr. Chair, and invite you to help us have a conversation about this, however you'd like to handle the discussion portion.
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, we had some discussion on this, obviously, at the last meeting about the symmetrical piece. You know, one of the things that we'll have to bring the documents together, so we won't have two sections on speed goals. Now, I think where we left off last time, and again, anybody else can correct here, is that we wanted to do additional. So we had the goal of obviously the 100 by 20 by 2026, which is the current legislation, and then we have the 25.3 for all of Minnesota by 2022. There was a discussion around pushing for the 100 by 20 to the remaining 157,000 households. That was the kind of the recommendation we're going to put in place. And then there's going to be language around potentially investigating, what future speed goals should be. That's kind of where I had it down last time. Now, I would like to hear from anyone, whether it's from the subgroup here or from the rest of the task force, if that's something we need to change that to be more aligned with kind of what's here or something else. And again, we'll have the opportunity to discuss this when we have it all down on paper on one document. But it'd be great to get some initial thoughts now from the team. Brian, go ahead.
Thanks, Teddy. Thanks, Bernadette. That was a major part of our discussion last time, as you noted, Teddy, and on the speed goals, is that our committee, the Minnesota Model, has been really trying to be meticulous on how we worded the language, that we don't want to forget the people out there that don't have 25.3, that they are still a priority. And I think moving the needle to say, okay, 100 by 20, I think that pushed everybody to the consensus level that okay, we'll agree to that as the new model. My only concern is if we call it a goal to go to 100 by 100, I think that's fine to say that's a goal, and we'll study the effects of COVID, which you've already done a great job with, Bernadine, you and your committee. I think that could be maybe something in our next report, but even allude to it that we're ready to move the needle to 100 by 100. But I just don't want to get into the way the priority is funding. Funding is critical for us to get the resources to deliver the money. That I just don't want to get out ahead of our skis, as you might say, to all of a sudden make that big of a step. But I agree where you're headed. I just want to, I guess, ask the other members of the Minnesota Model Committee to share some of their thoughts.
Brian, this is Teresa. I concur with you. I certainly understand all the work put behind this. I appreciate that, but I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We should be taking baby steps with this to begin with, and then next year when we have a chance, hopefully, to get back together and get some more people to talk to us and educate us on symmetric speeds and what is necessary at home. I don't need symmetric speeds at home. I'm sure many do. I don't have my 4 kids have graduated. I'm sure might think differently if it was different for myself, but I can't believe that everybody needs this or else. There's plenty of people out there, say a retired grandpa, that he's alone and he checks his email twice a day and looks at the news, and then he's done. He isn't looking for expensive, costly broadband. He might be fine with 25.3 or 100 by 20. So again, I appreciate everything everybody's doing, but I think we're jumping too far ahead. I want to make sure that everybody gets served first. And we have RDOF coming up. We don't even know what 2026 is going to look like.
Micah, you have a comment?
Yeah, the challenge, and I guess when we're looking at this, and speaking of RDOF, and I don't know if, how many of you, there's several balls, it's just like when there's one, the RDOF was a major fail. And you're looking at the speed goals that were set through there, Minnesota got handed. If you look at the map for the RDOF funding, you have fixed base wireless companies that are produced that say that they were able to bid at a zero weight, saying that they're going to deliver fiber services, and they did a disservice because we're not going to hit speed goals if what they say they can deliver, and no one's making aware of that. Well, let me back up on this. If you look at funding models that were put out there are several areas in Minnesota that are not going to get, it probably won't reach the 25.3 as a result if you look at what happened with the RDOF. And I don't know how we make aware of, the utilization funding. I know that, I forget which group it was that they listed the RDOF funding and then the CAFR 2 funding when we're trying to come up with the amount of money we're going to apply to this. And I know that it was mentioned on there, there's different requirements to RDOF and to CAFR 2 for speed goals that don't even match up to our 25.3. So we need to, and I don't know what I'm what I'm trying to get at is if you look at money that was provided, you're going to prevent folks from going into those areas. Folks that would have provided the speakles that what we're trying to get the 100-100 or the ability to scale up. Your point about, you know, the grandpa, whatever, if you look at how people are communicating through like conferencing and everything, people are going to need higher speeds and they're going to need affordable higher speeds. And there's an article in Pots and Pans, I don't know how many people follow that one, that talked about where the FCC dropped the ball on this. And I'm not saying that we do the speakles, but we need to make awareness that, you know, that we can find a way to fund and get this. And if we're correlating RDOF and capital to what we're asking the broadband folks, we're doing a disservice because they're not doing the checks and balances that we have through like what, you know, like the funding that we're asking for indeed is there are some checks and balances to make sure, like when we talk about it's scalable to 100, that they're meeting the Minnesota goals, but the funding that the FCC is. And so now when we present our findings to the legislature and they say, well, we don't need to take care of this because RDOF and CAFR 2 are going to provide funding. And if you look at those models, they can't even hit the 25.3. I don't want speed to get forgotten. And like I said, we have ability to do checks and balances and make those goals. But I know everyone is, when you talk about moving that needle, it created quite a discussion at the last meeting, but we're already asking for that. So I don't know, I'm a little bit frustrated with how how those two other funding mechanisms are going to detract from what we're trying to do here.
Paul has a comment.
Just a couple of observations. You know, I know the subcommittee's report references this state broadband policy explorer. I know this was from Ann's. You know, I went to her blog post from February 20th. I think we're not giving ourselves enough credit of our speed goal that's already out there. I mean, while we're talking about changing it, we're already in the upper tier. You know, I don't think we should get apoplectic because of what Hawaii or Vermont or Iowa's going to do. But, you know, when you look at the expanded list, not just that small list that's presented in this subcommittee report, we're well ahead and we are in a leadership position on speed goals right now with 100 by 20. I would also note, if I'm missing it, I apologize, but I looked over the League of Cities policy recommendations, and they do not have a speed goal recommendation. There's numerous recommendations with respect to the broadband grant program, and but you know, I know these mayors have a different alliance, but I didn't seem to see anything specifically from the League of Cities on that. And I still go back to, you know, this does not change or help people that are unserved one bit. You know, I'm about, we set goals, let's accomplish those goals. It's almost like we're afraid to finish a goal because the legislature is going to say, well, your work is done. I mean, if that's the case, then we're obviously not doing an effective job of communicating to legislators the progress we've made and the investment that they're affording this program, which is emulated around the country. I'm more than happy to stand on a 100% 25 by 3, hopefully within the next year and a half, and then 100% 100 by 20 in you know, a year, 2 years, and then we start the conversation about what do we need to truly create, you know, a technology viable state that's on par with, you know, any country in the world in terms of broadband. I just think we need to look at that in terms of accomplishing a goal, moving forward. There's a next goal. We keep moving the goalposts. I think legislators are going to be like, wait a minute, when, you know, what happened to that other goal? So just my comments there.
Thank you, Paul. Steve Fensky.
Hey everybody, sorry I was a little late today. Couple things. The statute already talks about symmetrical. It already says anything we fund is supposed to be 100 by 100 scalable. So I'm a little concerned about the idea that, well, let's talk about whether that's even appropriate when it's already in the statute. That doesn't mean set a goal, a new goal today or something, but I think we have to recognize that the statute's already aiming at 100 symmetrical. And so if not this year, I think the task force should reckon with how are we getting to this? We've set this direction, this policy goal of 100 symmetrical. That's what we've told everybody to build to if they get the funding. When do they deliver that? When do we want to get to that? The other piece of this, the need today is very different. Micah touched on this. It's going to grow. The data needs for people are going to grow. So I presume here we're not building for today. We're building for future. So I'd rather keep that mindset than just what we're looking at today.
Thanks, Steve. Steve Georgie?
Thank you. I listened to Paul, and he's hoping that we get to 25.3 in 1.5 to 2 years. What do you think that does for the students and the families up here in rural Minnesota that can't connect and conduct distance learning, and that's the current environment that they're stuck in? And there's no timetable on the end of this pandemic and these conditions. So, I agree with Steve Fensky, 100 symmetrical is already out there. I think it's our job as a task force to remind the governor, remind the legislature that Minnesota once had a Minnesota model that was looked upon as a real success story, but we are significantly falling behind. And the RDOF auction, as Micah points out, could just cripple us, because the company that's awarded $312 million has got census blocks all over rural Minnesota, and they can't deliver. We don't want their product. We know what it is. Look it up. The speed test, 30,000 speed tests in Minnesota. Their top is 5.3 download. So we got a real issue with this RDOF stuff. I'm writing letters to my senators and congressmen asking them to take a look at this. And I hope the task force is willing to take a position with our governor also, that he needs to step up and raise some eyebrows. But I agree with Bernadine. And again, I think Steve is on the right track too, that it's already in there. And again, hopefully this report puts out a little, 3-bell alarm that we're losing ground when it comes to the technology. I had a meeting in July with a representative from Essentia Healthcare. In March of 2020, they had less than 100, what do you want to call them, media visit, whatever, telehealth visits in their system. At the end of July, they had 200,000. So for that poor grandpa that's working off a 10-1 that might need to do a telehealth visit, it's not going to work. We're talking about broadband equity across this one Minnesota. And we like synchronicity, so we have the same opportunities as everybody in the metro and suburban areas. So I think at a minimum, this task force needs to have a strong recommendation and a reminder. We're losing ground.
Thanks. Thank you. Micah, you have another comment?
Yeah, and that's my point. Thanks to the Steves. One of the things, going back to the RDOF, were they had 16 states. They got, of the 9 billion that was there, they did a disservice. And that the biggest thing was that the money was there. This is money that came from the Universal Service Fund. they were anticipating $16 billion in it, and they only allocated out 9.6. Now, LTD Holdings is out of Las Vegas, which they were able to bid at a zero weight, and they're not a zero weight. They can't deliver what they said, and that needs to be made aware. And that's where, to Steve's point, what's coming next. The legislators are going to get distracted and saying, well, we don't need to fund this because you've already got that. If LTD gets to proceed, they made a lion's share of Minnesota toxic, because no one's going to touch that, because they got this funding, and they're going to start here on January 29th when if the FCC approves their long form, because they did the short form, they allowed them to bid. They bid at a 20 weight and a zero weight. If you're not, I can provide some information as to how they get those weights. But they were able to deter folks that were actually going to do something. Like up in Roseville County, there's the rural electric up there was going to build. It was part of their plan, and because LTD was able to come in and bid, they bid it down to a 20%, where they could have got more funding if they weren't allowed to bid at a zero weight. So they basically made it so toxic. No one really wants to test that, and that's in the areas that are unserved that we're trying to get to. And that needs to be made aware. We need some way to convey that to the legislation, that they don't look at the money from the RDOF auction, come in and say, well, you're going to get this money to deliver the service, and it doesn't meet the speed goal. So what Steve was saying, that's all.
Thanks, Micah. Teresa, you have a comment?
Yeah, my only comment is, I think all of us are looking at LTD and wondering with a big exclamation point. So I appreciate your comment, Micah.
Thanks, Teresa. Other comments? Okay, so what I'm gathering from this conversation, I don't think that there's any disagreement on that we want to look at the speed goals, and we want to make sure that preferably symmetrical is where we want to be, and that we need to make sure that we have additional capability for Minnesotans. I think the slight disagreement is probably around, and this time around, in this report that goes to the governor and the legislature this year, hopefully end of this year, beginning of next year, going into this cycle, should we have something in there or not? So my proposal, if everybody's okay with it, is let's try to combine this document. And to the point Steve Fensky said, some of this is already in the statute today. And to Steve George's point, we want to maybe have some strong language around, and Micah, you said making people aware, right? So let's see if we can craft that into the language. We'll work on that early part of next week. We'll probably make the document available to everyone like on Wednesday, and then we can have a discussion on Friday whether the points we put in there represent, or at least we can line around that, at least for this time around. As some have mentioned, obviously we're submitting another report next year, so there's always time to go and adjust and craft and all that. So, but let's make sure we get the language that we all can be comfortable with, or at least we like the tone it's sending. And I think the two things is, obviously, on one hand, we want to make sure that we have better capability for Minnesotans, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that we achieve some of the stated goals and we don't leave people behind as a result of it. So we'll work through that. Brian, you had a comment?
I'm just going to say I think that's a good step, Teddy, to go through and see what the authors can put together for that. I would like to ask Steve Fensky to comment a little bit. Our group is updating our spreadsheet, and the discussion on RDOF does have an effect on the modeling number that we're looking to ask for. And I don't know if Steve is going to share some comments and concerns, because I really do have some concerns that we do have to recognize the RDOF dollars. But I agree with Micah and Steve and everybody else. Those are really what is going to happen. Are they going to get awarded, or are there going to be other things that happen? Will the FCC throw that out and start all over again? So do we count them in our spreadsheet or not? But I'll let Steve make some comments there.
Steve, before you go, I think if everybody could mute if you're not speaking, because I think there's some feedback coming. That's good. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, my subgroup talked a little bit about the RDOF numbers. It's obviously a hot topic, and there's some question about whether it will be as advertised here, or whether some won't be able to deliver. And so we last time talked about remodeling some of the spreadsheets, and I'm going to try and share here if I can. Teddy, are you guys seeing the spreadsheet?
Yep, we are.
Okay, so at the top we have the 2022 goal of 25.3. This is similar to what you saw the last time around. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm switching. That's my playing around with numbers tab. Okay, I'm sorry. Top one is what you've seen before. We adjusted to 157,000 households. Cost of connection, I know there's some debate about that or some discussion, but right now it's the same. This added in the RDOF money on a per year basis. Of course, we don't actually know how that's going to be distributed or when over 10 years, but this is, I feel, the best we can do with it, unless there's some other ideas. And the biennial amount we come out with under the 2022 goal. There's also discussion about adding a 2026 model. So that's below here, similar at the top, and the biennial amount reduces here pretty dramatically because we're looking over 6 years. For this one, the assumptions are the same, except that the RDOF, we're looking at about 6 years of that fund. I've still broken down on a per year basis, but that's what we've come up with. The question our subgroup has is whether we recognize that full RDOF amount in these, or if we recognize only part of it or none of it right now. And to switch the top on this page is the number we come out with if it's 0. And I suspect we can assume more than 0. So I'd like input from the group on what is the right number to use in our chart if we're going to include RDOF.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. So Steve, maybe we'll put this into the discussion and have I know we're kind of running short on time, and that's maybe a conversation we can have Friday. Teresa, you had a quick comment, but before we do that, Bernadine, I wanted to make sure I gave you the opportunity to finish off the what else was in that document, right? To make sure you kind of addressed it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Teddy. Can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I want to make sure that the task force has a chance to weigh in on the supporting recommendations. So I think people understand and expect this. In the past, the task force has weighed in on telecommunications access equity aid and the regional library telecommunications aid, and there was concern. Our task force adapted our recommendations to account for concern expressed by that full task force when we first presented these, that we don't want to take the eye off the ball of funding the fund. And, do we lard this up with too many other recommendations? So we also felt it was incumbent upon us not to be silent on these important efforts because the task force has spoken on them in the past. And so the solution that we came up with and are proposing is that we recommend that it says here, supporting recommendations, broadband is the solution. The task force supports recommendations from the front lines. And so recognizing that access and adoption is foundational to many of our goals, it's necessary and sufficient that we lend the language here, the task force lends its support and commends to the attention of the legislature and the governor the following recommendations from other state agencies and entities that will further our goals. And here is where we have put 5 efforts that we are endorsing in the commending and supporting under this supporting recommendations category. So the telecommunications equity access aid, and this is language that Mark Johnson has helped us make sure that it's aligned with those stakeholders. And we try in each of these to explain the connection to this investment to the state goals. So there's an explanation there. Number 1. Number 2 is the regional library telecommunications aid that we've historically endorsed as a task force, that it's funded. And then Yvonne brought to our attention, since she's joined our task force, the opportunity to call, to hold up here work elsewhere in the government about ensuring equitable access to digital formatting. And so this recommendation comes out of the Accessibility Grant Advisory Council, which is, goes really to the heart of our charge as a subcommittee about digital inclusion. Number 4 has to do with healthcare leaders, and we heard very poignantly from Steve Georgie this morning about the demand on networks to deliver healthcare in a post-COVID environment. And there's some supporting materials on the site that underscore this effort that healthcare leaders across the state are trying to jumpstart to help Minnesota get positioned to have the infrastructure we need to do this. And number 5 is transportation. Ensure that Minnesota's positioned to adopt this innovation. So these are the 5 efforts that we are proposing be included in our report under a supplemental recommendations category. And with that, I'll open it up to comments and feedback from the whole group.
Okay, go ahead. So I don't see any hands up, and I know we're out of time and folks I probably have to jump off to something else. So recommendation here is we're going to take this, put it in a document. Like I said, the writers will work through it on Monday. Probably by Wednesday, we'll have a draft document loaded. My ask of everyone is that, once you get a notification that says the draft document's there, is that you get a chance to go through and go through the document, highlight the areas where you have concerns or comments and whatnot. And then when we get together on Friday, we'll have a robust conversation on those comments, right? And then we can either go back and say, we need to edit this doesn't look right, I don't agree with this statement, all those kind of things. So it gives us another round to be able to shore that up. So, but the good news is we feel like we're, there's maybe 1 or 2 areas where we have some kind of alignment to have there, but for the most part, we seem to be in good shape with the majority of the 35-page document that's there today. So that's good.
If I could, I'll just add that our subcommittee did discuss, we didn't get together, but we discussed over email the idea of including there a recommendation regarding what we heard at the last meeting from MREA about easements for electric co-ops. We did not have on our subcommittee sufficient agreement to include that in our report. And so we have not brought that forward for the full group, but I just raised that in case there are others on the task force that would want to advocate for a statement on the task force about that. We did not include that in the recommendation we're bringing forward.
Okay. Thank you, Bernadine. And I think there's one section about easements and all that, so maybe you can take a look at that and see if that needs to be modified and whatnot. I know, Mark, you have that in that second recommendation. So. Okay, I know we're 3 minutes over time. Any last comments or questions? And then Diane's asking, if you have any trouble accessing the documents on the SharePoint site, just let her know, and then we'll make sure that you can get access to it. All right, I don't see any hands up or any comments. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your engagement. Good discussion. I think we're making some really good progress, and we should have some good material that we produce. But then, obviously, as you know, the work starts when that document's finalized. So more fun to come after that. With that, I want to wish you a happy weekend, and we will talk next week. All right.